All right, everybody, welcome to another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be talking about something everybody thinks they know about, right?
Hmm?
The Titanic.
Right.
Like everybody knows the story of the Titanic, the unsinkable ship that sank.
Yeah, it's one of those events that's so well known, even after a century, people are still talking about it, writing about it, making movies about it.
And there are still so many questions.
Exactly.
And that's where all of you come in, because you have sent us so many videos about Titanic conspiracy theories, and we are going to dive into those today.
It seems like some people find the official story, just lacking something.
Yeah.
And maybe the scale of the tragedy, I think, leaves some room for these alternative narratives to take hold.
And there's something about a good conspiracy theory, right?
Absolutely.
So before we get into the real meat of these theories, let's set the scene for people.
Okay, so the Titanic British passenger liner set sail in April of 1912.
Brand new.
Brand new. This is the maiden voyage from Southampton to New York City. And at the time, it was like the top of the line when it came to luxury engineering, and they even called it unsinkable.
They did.
They did.
About that.
Yeah, about that. So in the early morning hours of April 15th, the Titanic strikes an iceberg and sinks, and we lose over 1,500 lives.
It's a tragedy.
That's a huge tragedy that shocked the world, and we're still feeling it today.
Okay, so enough of the sad stuff. Let's get into the conspiracy theories. The first one, what if the ship that sank wasn't actually the Titanic?
Okay, so this is the Olympic switch theory, and it basically says that the Titanic was swapped with its sister ship, the Olympic.
So there was another ship.
There was another ship that looked almost exactly the same.
Oh, so they were built at the same
They
time.
were built around the same time.
Okay.
And this theory claims that the Olympic had been damaged in a previous accident and it was going to be too expensive to repair. Okay.
So the White Star Line,
And the insurance money.
they're thinking, let's get the insurance money. So they swap it out with the Titanic, thinking, okay, well, it's already vulnerable. Let's just send it out. And
Everybody will think it's the Titanic and they'll pay for it.
exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, this is where people love to bring in J.P. Morgan,
Oh, J.P. Morgan, the banker.
the financier.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was supposed to be on that voyage.
But he canceled last minute.
Canceled last minute.
And that's suspicious.
Very suspicious.
Yeah.
At least according to the conspiracy theorists.
I have a little spooky music and it's a movie. Oh, yeah.
But it's true, though, that the Olympic did have an accident, right?
It did. It collided with a British warship in 1911.
Okay.
But the idea that they could switch those two ships like that is, how do you even do that?
That's a big undertaking.
Thousands of shipyard workers, the crew members, somebody would have talked.
Yeah, somebody would have said something.
Right. And the level of secrecy needed is almost impossible to imagine.
That's a lot of people to keep quiet. So many people would have to have known.
Exactly.
But I will say one thing. The video did mention something interesting. They said there was something weird about the portholes on the ship.
Yeah, there are photographs of the Titanic, and they show a different number of portholes, like before and after the launch.
Before and after.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So, of course, this is like, oh, see, it was a different ship.
Proof. So how do they explain that?
Well, it's true that the discrepancies are there, but there's also evidence that they made modifications while they were building the Titanic.
Oh, yeah.
So it's totally possible that the number of portholes changed just for aesthetics or for structure, you know?
So they're like, oh, that doesn't look right. Let's add some more.
Yeah, let's add a couple more here. Let's cover a couple up over there.
Okay, so that's not proof.
Not quite.
But this J.P. Morgan thing is still pretty sus, right?
It's a little sus.
I mean, he was like Mr. Moneybags back then.
Yeah, he was the epitome of wealth and power.
Which leads us to conspiracy theory number 2. So this theory is saying he wasn't just trying to, get some insurance money out of this deal.
No, this theory says that J.P. Morgan orchestrated the entire sinking to eliminate his rivals.
So it's like a murder mystery.
Basically, and the victims in this case were all people who opposed the creation of the Federal Reserve.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so tell me more about that.
Okay, so the theory says that people like John Jacob Astor, Benjamin Guggenheim, Isidor Straus, these big
I
names,
do recognize those names, yeah.
big important guys, and they were all on the Titanic.
They were.
And these were the guys that were standing in the way of J.P. Morgan's plan to establish the Federal Reserve.
So get rid of them and you've got a clear path.
Exactly. They're out of the picture. And suddenly the Federal Reserve, which did face a lot of opposition at the time,
Right?
it's established just a year later.
Wow, so this is like next level conspiracy stuff.
Right. High stakes international finance.
It's juicy, but were these guys actually opposed to the Federal Reserve, or is that just part of the theory?
Yeah. That's the thing. There's no actual evidence that Astor, Guggenheim, or Strauss were part of any organized opposition.
So they might not have even been on his radar. For all we know, they could have been supporters.
It's possible. And honestly, would JP Morgan really risk something as big as this?
Yeah, I mean, to actually sink a ship with all those people on it,
It seems pretty far-fetched.
that's cold-blooded, even for a guy like JP Morgan.
Right, like, he was powerful, but orchestrating a disaster of this magnitude just seems like a lot of risk.
For what gain?
Yeah.
I mean, he was already super rich and powerful.
Exactly.
And didn't he have like a real reason for canceling his trip?
Yeah, he was a big art collector, and he was supposed to meet with an artist in France about a commission.
Oh, so maybe he just decided to stay home and look at his art.
Maybe he just changed his mind.
Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, right?
Right, sometimes the simplest explanation is the best one.
It's easy to get caught up in these big, elaborate theories, but like,
Yeah.
maybe it wasn't some big conspiracy.
Exactly. Sometimes things just happen.
So are we moving on to theory number 3?
Yeah, you ready for this one? This one involves a mummy.
A mummy.
Wait, like King Tut.
Not King Tut, but like an ancient Egyptian mummy.
Okay, I am intrigued. Tell me everything.
All right, so this theory says that there was this wealthy collector, and he had bought this mummy,
Oh,
and he was bringing it to America on the Titanic.
to put in a museum or something?
Exactly.
Okay.
But legend has this particular mummy was cursed.
A cursed mummy.
A cursed mummy, and it was supposed to bring bad luck to anyone who disturbed it.
Oh no, and they disturbed it.
Big time. They put it on a ship.
Oh no, that's not good.
And, well, you know the rest. So the theory's saying the mummy sunk the Titanic.
The mummy's curse sunk the Titanic.
I bet those videos you watched had all kinds of spooky details about this curse.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like a vengeful priestess and people getting sick and all sorts of bad omens.
But there's one small problem with this theory, right?
Go on.
There was no mummy.
You got it. There is no record of any mummy on the Titanic.
Really?
We have the cargo manifests.
They kept track of everything.
Everything, and nowhere on those lists is there any mention of a mummy.
So much for the curse of the pharaoh.
Right, but you know what I find interesting about this one?
What's that?
It shows how much we want to believe in something.
Like we want an explanation.
Yes, especially when something as tragic as the Titanic happens, it's hard to accept that it might just be random chance.
It's easier to blame a mummy than bad luck.
Exactly, a curse is almost comforting compared to the idea that a disaster like that could just happen.
So we've got one more theory, right?
One more, and this one takes us into the world of espionage.
Ooh, espionage. Tell me more.
This is a secret U-boat attack theory.
Okay, I'm listening.
This theory says that the Titanic was deliberately targeted and sunk by a German submarine.
So not an accident at all.
Not at all. This was sabotage.
Wow.
And the motive...
Germany wanted to like take out a British ship?
Well, it was more about the tensions that were already brewing between Germany and Great Britain.
Oh, right, World War I.
Exactly. It didn't actually start until 1914, but, you know, things were already getting tense.
So this would have been a way to weaken Britain.
Some people believe so, and they point to reports from survivors who said they heard explosions right before the ship went down.
Explosions.
Yeah.
Like more than just the ship breaking apart.
Exactly like torpedo fire.
But could a German U-boat even do that back then? I mean, were they that advanced?
That's a good question, and this is where the theory kind of falls apart.
Yeah.
So German U-boats did exist in 1912.
Okay.
But the technology was still pretty new, and those early U-boats weren't really capable of crossing the Atlantic.
Oh, yeah.
And they definitely weren't capable of sinking a ship as large as the Titanic.
So that's a pretty big hole in the theory.
It is, and on top of that, there's no record of any German U-boats being anywhere near the Titanic when it sank.
You'd think they would have noticed that.
You'd think so, but there's no mention of it in any of the naval logs from the time.
So what about those explosions that people heard?
It's sad, but it was probably just the sound of the ship breaking apart under the pressure of all that water rushing in.
So no secret U-boat attack.
Probably not.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today,
We have gone through a lot of theories.
and none of them really seem to hold water.
Not really.
But you know what I find fascinating about this whole thing?
What's that?
It's like these theories are telling us something about what people were worried about back then.
You're right. Like that JP Morgan theory, even though it's not very likely, it shows that people were worried about having too much power and money, and we're still worried about that today.
Totally. Especially when something terrible happens, it makes you wonder who's really in control.
And then there's that U-boat theory. Sure, it probably wasn't true, but you can see how people would believe it with everything going on in the world back then.
Right? Everybody was on edge.
Yeah, it was a time of suspicion and fear. People were worried about what they couldn't see or control.
So even if these theories aren't true, they can still tell us something about the past.
Exactly. They're like clues about how people saw the world.
I never thought about it like that before.
It all comes down to this basic human need to understand things, right? Especially when something as awful as the Titanic happens, it's hard to just accept it.
Sometimes the truth is just too hard to handle.
We want there to be a reason, a cause, something we can point to even if it's made up.
It's like we need a story to make sense of it all.
And those stories, the ones that really stick with us, they often say more about us than they do about the actual event.
Wow, this has been amazing. We really went deep today.
We did.
I have to say, I came into this thinking we were just going to have some laughs about these crazy Titanic theories.
Right.
But you've really made me think about them in a whole new way.
I'm glad to hear that.
It's not just about proving them right or wrong. It's about understanding why they exist in the first place.
It's about asking questions.
Exactly. So we covered a lot today. Insurance scams, murder plots, mummies, secret U-boats.
You've been through it all.
And even though we might never know for sure what really happened to the Titanic, I think we learned a lot today.
I agree.
About the Titanic itself, but also about ourselves and how we try to make sense of the world around us.
Because sometimes the most interesting mysteries aren't about what happened, but about why we believe what we believe.
Well said. So to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Titanic conspiracy theories. What do you think? Do any of these theories resonate with you? What other mysteries are out there waiting to be explored? Keep asking those questions, keep searching for answers, and as always, keep diving deep with us.
Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe the channel. Please share your feedbacks and thoughts through comments.